Hello again. About 3 or 4 days ago I made a video about unwrapping and unpacking the Raspberry Pi Zero and the Raspberry Pi 3, and at that time I promised that I'd come back and give you a little bit more information about connectivity of the two machines. And here I am, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start off with the Raspberry Pi Zero, what we need to connect it, showing you how to download the Noob's operating system. I know this is fairly basic to a lot of you, but if there's anyone new to the Raspberry Pi, it might be useful. And then I'm going to show you how to connect it up and what we can expect from it. And that will be in this video. My next video will be about the Raspberry Pi 3. So let's get started now and have a look at how to connect and download the software for the Raspberry Pi Zero. Oh, by the way, I've had a really good response from my last video on unwrapping the Raspberry Pi Zero and the Raspberry Pi 3, and I'd like to say thank you all very much for that. So let's get started and have a look at the Raspberry Pi Zero. So just a quick reminder of the size of the Raspberry Pi Zero. Here it is in comparison with a standard ballpoint pen. You can see just how tiny this machine is. So what do we actually need to do to connect it up to our keyboard, our mouse, HDMI monitor and our power supply? Well, to do all those things on this machine we're going to need a USB hub. So let's get started with one of those. So here I'm using the this adapter connector, which is a micro USB to a standard USB connector. Then a standard USB plug to a USB hub, which I have here, and because of the power restrictions of this Raspberry Pi Zero, I'm using a powered hub. We can't really expect that machine to power a keyboard, maybe other devices from that USB, so use a powered USB hub for that, and this is just a cheapy one that I think I got at Maplin's. So that's the first connection to it, and in my case, when I received the Raspberry Pi Zero, I actually received the micro to standard USB connector for free. In addition to the USB hub connector, we're going to need an HDMI adapter to go from the mini HDMI output socket to a standard HDMI cable, which I've got here. So that's going to be the extra connection which we're going to need. So now we have the two. We have the HDMI connector and we have the hub, USB hub connector. The last one, just pointing to there, is the power connector. So that's the next thing that we're going to have to put into place to get our system up and running. Now we're fully complete with our power supply, 5 volt, 2.5 amp power supply connected. Well, so much for the hardware setup. Now we come to the software and the download of the software. I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail about this because basically it's the same as my previous videos and the same as some of you may have done before on downloading the software. You simply have to go into the Raspberry Pi website, you click on Downloads, and then you select Noob's, New out-of-the-box software. You simply then download that to your download folder on your hard drive of your main computer, your C drive. You configure a micro SD card and format it, put it in your card reader, and then simply drag and drop the files from your hard drive onto the micro SD card. There's no problems now with unzipping and things like this. It all happens very simply. Once the files have downloaded, and it does take a little while, maybe 10-15 minutes, you simply put the SD card in your Raspberry Pi and fire it up. Now the Raspberry Pi Zero is not as fast as the Raspberry Pi B. It is a single core machine. It's much faster than the original A model, but it's not as fast as it doesn't really compare with the speed of the B, and certainly not the B plus. So it does take a little while to configure to read the file that you've downloaded and to set itself up. One thing I would say that and I don't know whether this is to do with the Raspberry Pi Zero or the new upgrade on the software, but it doesn't automatically go into the setup screen. You have to go into the terminal, LX terminal, and then type in sudo config sys in order to get the menu up, which will enable you to set up things such as overclocking, time, dates and time zones. Now whether this is a quirk or whether this is something that's it's been designed to do, but it automatically boots into desktop when you turn the machine on. Having said that, it's a remarkable machine. It may be not quite as fast as the B, excuse me, but so it's a little bit back in time as far as that's concerned, but it's way ahead of its time in its size and miniaturization. To get a computer that only cost about £5 in something which is about half the size of a credit card now is just truly remarkable, and the miniaturization and the design is just superb. So if you have been able to get out of a Raspberry Pi Zero, enjoy it, learn your way around it, and I'm sure you'll have great fun with it. I want to now show you a little bit more video before I go on the home screen and the desktop rather, and some of the menu options that are available for you there. So let's do that now. Okay then, so let's have a quick run through the desktop. Well, we have up the top the menu, we have a web browser option, and we have the terminal, the LX terminal. The LX terminal will allow us to go into that and type in commands that we can program in Python. So if we type in there Python and hit return, we get the Python prompt up, which will enable us to do some programming or whatever else we want to do there. It's also useful for going in and doing downloads and some other things that you may want to do. The other things we have on the menu are programming, Office, Internet, games, Minecraft. Well, don't get me started on Minecraft, I will be here all night. But yes, it's there, and it's also a version that we can actually modify and program, so that's quite challenging. The rest of the menu gives us accessories, file manager, PDF viewer, task manager, etc., etc. We've got a help, Debian reference and Raspberry Pi help, quite useful, and the Magpie magazine if you subscribe to it. Lots of preferences, and a run button where we can run our own programs that we may have written in an editor piece of software. What I'm going to do now is, I don't think what these are. What I'm going to do now is to shut down the machine. So I'm going to go to shutdown, and then it will give me the option of what I want to do, reboot, log out or shut down, and I'm going to shut down. And that's the end of the session. Well, that's it. Thank you for watching. It's been a fairly simple video, but just one that maybe will help those of you who are starting out with a Raspberry Pi, and those of you who are thinking of buying a Raspberry Pi Zero, just to get a little bit more involved. I deliberately made it as easy to follow as possible, and basically setting up the Raspberry Pi Zero is quite easy with the new Noobs software. So a little bit of patience and a lot of enjoyment. So thank you for watching, and I will see you again soon, probably with the Raspberry Pi 3. Thank you, and take care.